Yeah, good evening and welcome everyone. As you know, my name is Sandeep and I'm very happy to have Sharda again with me to talk about this interesting topic. Is inclusivity and diversity activism or a real need? You might be wondering that why are we calling activism? Well, we are calling it activism because everywhere, whether it's a conference or the government office or the boardroom, everyone talks of inclusivity, everyone talks of diversity. But when you really check out the ground reality, still a lot needs to be done. To kick off this today's discussion, let me share a small story with you. I think it was 2017 or 2018 when I went to Ajanta Ellora. In one of the caves, on the ceiling, there was a carving. The carving was that three people are carrying a heavy beam. On one end, there was a couple, a man and a woman. The beam was on their shoulder, and they were smiling. On the other end was one single woman, and her expressions were as if, agony, pain, jaan nikal gayi uski. And Ajanta Ellora, mind it, was made 3,000 years back. So I'll only say this thing: this male-female inclusivity has been an issue through the ages, as depicted by this carving or the sculpture in Ajanta Ellora. So yes, now I pass on the mic to Sharda. Sharda, set the ball rolling with your thoughts. Over to you.
Good evening, Sandeep. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me once again to this platform. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And today's topic in particular, being a woman, I guess it strikes a chord everywhere. Uh, Let me first share my own feelings about inclusivity. Of course, being a woman in India was different. Uh, I grew up in Bihar, a Tamilian from Bihar. So it was always, I was always a kind of, I was always struggling to be included in groups. And luckily for me, I managed to get included. But I think the importance of finding a place, even though I didn't belong to the mainstream, has always been a major part of my upbringing. I got married into a different culture. So I had to again fit in and have to kind of include and get myself included. I worked in a government setup in an organization for 25 years. I was in the government of India, where several times as a woman, you sometimes are the only woman in a huge organization. Interestingly, even 10 years ago, when I was in the Parliament of India, uh, it was very difficult for us to find a ladies' toilet within that prestigious building of ours. There are very, very few toilets. Some of us would have to really, really walk for miles together, and that circular building is indeed very difficult to walk around. So there are several places where the feeling of not belonging or being different from the entire band kind of hits you. And for me, I've not really had any major life changing discrepancies because of it, but I do understand how important it is to be included and to be part of the group. Uh, Having said this, I think what is more important, this was just said as a anecdote. I don't think it really is relevant to what we are speaking here today, because when we talk of inclusivity and diversity, uh, diversity can include anything. There are geographic, there is cultural, there is regional, there's gender, there is sexual orientation, there could be disabilities, you could have regional discrepancies, you could have of course race, color, skin color, uh, language, even simple things like some offices are not comfortable for left-handers. Some machines are not comfortable for a left-hander. So there are so many ways in which inclusivity and diversity can be addressed. And particularly in the workplace, I think it has become quite important now to understand that any corporate or any organization, if it really wants to thrive, not just in terms of being, of platitudes, of being this wonderful organization, great employer, sensitive employer, but even in terms of simple, hardcore bottom lines. It has been empirically proven that the greater your diversity, the greater you include people and talents from different spheres, the better you are, the better placed you are to make a success of your business or your product or your organization. Uh, so I think this is a good way to begin with. We basically want to talk about inclusivity, not just as a great necessity. So when you say activism, yes, activism is used in a negative way, but in many times activism is what actually brings change. So I think right now what we have to do is create some degree of activism around diversity and inclusion, so that we need to then shift it to what is a real need, because you need not be active about a thing which is not a real need. And diversity and inclusion is indeed a real need, not just in terms of what is the correct thing to do, but also in terms of what is the best profitable thing to do.
Well, I totally resonate with what you said, Sharda. Activism, yes, is needed to shake, to wake up the sleeping lion.
Right.
Okay. But when activism becomes more of a profession, to get the limelight, and then it tends to become mindless. You see, and I've seen a lot of activism where it ultimately boils down to male bashing. You see, when we talk of the inclusiveness of women, the way I look at it, if we are talking of the inclusiveness at the corporate, it is the men need to be inclusive of the females, and the female need to be inclusive of the male, because I believe both of the men and the women, they're complementary to each other. And even if we look at the uh, mental makeup, science says 95% both are identical. It's only the 5% difference which nature has made intentionally. Uh, but the challenge arises, you see, is the girls, the women, especially in countries like India. Now, I'm not saying India, I'm saying countries like India are so brainwashed that despite wanting to come out, wanting to move ahead, they don't have the confidence. Like a friend of mine who's a HR head was saying that we keep advertising, we keep asking girls to apply, but then they do not apply. As a result, despite wanting to hire girls or promote girls, when no one comes forward, we land up, promoting men or hiring men. So, what do you think that since you have worked in various positions, you have worked with a large number of people, what do you think? How can this issue be addressed so that the girls start coming forward?
You've touched a very important point, Sandeep. It's true that women, particularly in countries and societies, cultures like India, where a lot of traditional, conventional kind of beliefs continue to dominate the family setup and the hierarchies within families, girls are not really encouraged to go out and make a big profession of themselves. If it's a girl who's a super achieving girl, she's a bright kid, she's doing very well, getting very good marks, she's very bold, then people say, ah, ye to doctor banegi, ye to professor banegi, ye to kaam karegi. But if it's a girl who's very average or probably even dull, the only option open for her is marriage. So isko jaldi se find a good guy and just finish the whole thing. This doesn't happen to a dull boy. A boy may be dull, a boy may not have the same talents, but regardless of his skills or his abilities, he's always goaded and directed towards making a career for himself. So I think that is where the differentiation happens. Uh, Things are changing. There's no doubt that from my generation to the next one, I see a lot more girls in a lot more unconventional positions. Uh, when I entered service, for example, the police forces, armed forces had no women. The police had very few women. Even the bureaucracy had less than 10%. Now we are much better. Our representation is better. Uh, there was this very uh, I don't know what to call it, but the topper among women was considered to be a big show, even if she came 20th in the rank because she was topper among women. Today, they no longer have to say that because in the top 10 ranks, very often the first four go to women. And that has been a wonderful change. Uh, there have been certain reasons for it. There, while I agree that genetically and biologically the male and the female are not entirely different, today if you want a blood transfusion or a kidney transplant, you're not going to look for only a man's kidney or a woman's. We just take blood from a human being. We take a human being's kidney or a human being's heart is transplanted. There is really only one organ that kind of separates us. And even in our own behavioral and mental makeup, many of us have both the masculine and the feminine qualities within us, if you could term them as such, the alpha and the beta, as they say. So uh, recognizing that and encouraging that is what traditional societies fail to do, because we still feel that the primary role of a woman is that of a nurturer, of that of a mother, of a homemaker. While those are all great concepts, and definitely we've all benefited from having our mothers around us, taking care of us, or cooking for us, and things like that. Uh, but we also need to realize that this brainwashing happens over in very, very subtle ways. These are not so, obvious. So when you start off by saying, "Bhaiya ke liye pani lao," bring water for your brother. The sister is kind of made to understand that the brother is the one who is not expected to go and pick up water. He's not expected to make tea. He's not expected to clean up his bed. He's not expected to do any of the general chores which are, part of any human being. So I think there we need to have some degree of cultural change. uh, but regardless, yes, women are scared, a little hesitant, diffident to enter some areas in particular when it comes to difficult assignments, remote areas, um, or things where extra long hours. There is a whole lot of difficulty because women have been constantly been, it's been rammed into their heads that they've got to have a balance. Even if you have a career, try to do a career where you are able to manage your home, because family comes first. So काम करो, लेकिन be kind of just an appendage to your husband's job. He is the one, he decides where you locate, he decides where you live, his career decides your social status, everything. You just kind of earn some pocket money and supplement the family income if necessary. But beyond that, you don't really need to look at career as something for growth or identity or recognition or contribution. And that is where I think, yes, women we need to change those perceptions. We need to tell women, and we need to tell organizations as well. See, women, as we were talking earlier, women, particularly in their peak, ages of 25, 30 to about 50, are also biologically constrained due to their own bodies, the fact that they have to obviously if they have children, or even something as regular as a menstrual period every month is something which is not often recognized by organizations. The fact that she might require, so I think now people are beginning to talk of all these things, that women might be allowed to take leave just because they have menstrual cramps, or allow the woman to understand that she can't go on tour if she's having some kind of a issue there. So these problems have prevented women from taking up touring posts. I know for my from my service, that a lot of the touring kind of activities were always the domain of men, and particularly in lower middle class homes or in the middle class homes where there isn't that many, you don't have that many domestic servants and maids to help. The woman has to be the chief maid and homemaker also. But then they also want her money because it kind of adds on to the family income. So the women there are, I think, extra pressurized, and I think that very often it's the women and it's these minorities, these kind of fringe people. They're the ones who are burdened with more domestic responsibilities and burdens, and therefore I really don't know how we will, but we have to find ways by which organizations also understand this and try to offer a kind of a hybrid situation for women where they can take on tough assignments and yet not have to displace themselves terribly from their comfort and their homes and their primary or whatever responsibilities, and yet they also are ready to venture into some new assignments and positions. It is a tightrope and it requires some time, but I think we need bolder decisions to be taken by corporates first, and we need bolder women to come up. We need mothers and fathers. We as parents, particularly, I think mothers of sons have a huge responsibility to teach their sons and their daughters that both housework and professional work are equally important for both genders, and uh, a man who doesn't know how to make tea should be as frowned upon as a girl who doesn't know how to make tea. It's quite simple. When you can frown upon a girl who can't work or can't write, you frown upon a man who can't make a cup of tea or can't cook himself a meal or can't make his own bed. Or I used to be so I don't know if I'm digressing, but I remember that even when I used to come home, I remember I would have a busy day and the next day we would have to travel somewhere. I would have to go back home late night, pack my bags, organize everything, and then get ready. And these men, my own colleagues and subordinates, they would have had their wives would have already done their packing for them. Ghar gaye, chai mila. So I remember saying this very often. I wish I had a wife. I wish I also had a wife who could, you know, receive me when I reach home with a cup
Uh,
of tea and pack my bags for me and keep it ready for my, next tour. And uh, I think men have it they don't realize how easy they have it sometimes. But
yes,
you're right.
I agree with you. We men definitely do have it easy. While you were narrating this thing, you were telling and you were talking about the mindset part, right? कि भाई के लिए law,
Uh-huh.
or the women being relegated to the background and told that, okay, you got to uh, stand as a substitute, right? To your husband, your main job is to look after the household. The entire last 40 years were going in my head. In the early 80s, the discussions which used to happen at home were identical to what you just narrated. And today, when my kids have grown up, I'm really very happy seeing my son being in the kitchen and my daughter-in-law traveling
Awesome.
for a good 15 days, right? My daughter-in-law, she doesn't know how to make tea. And but that doesn't make her less of a daughter-in-law,
Excellent.
right? So yes, uh, one reason which I believe is hampering or hampers women coming to the fore is the insecurity of men. Now, why do I say this thing? You see, women are emotionally much more resilient, or they might cry easily, right? They might use the women card. That's something different. All the poets and novelists have brainwashed them into doing it. But when it comes to really facing tough situations, women are definitely much more resilient than men emotionally. They're stronger. They can endure much more pain. And our brain does not distinguish between emotional pain and real pain.
Mm.
Men, on the contrary, are uh, driven by action, are, are driven by physical force, and they are not so strong, right? So whenever you find that man gets into a difficult situation, invariably he would be throwing his hands and feet around or raising his voice and shouting, right? And whereas the women would still be calm, would still be thinking logically, rationally. And now men know this thing, their subconscious realizes this thing that women are stronger. And empirically, as you said, yes, I've read a research, which was of the CEOs. They interviewed around 5,000 CEOs, a combination of men and women, and they were interviewed on 21 parameters. And you'll be surprised, the women CEOs, you know, outpaced men in 17 out of the 21 parameters. They scored much more. And I use the word outpaced because it was more like leading and taking the company forward, but they scored much higher. Number two, they also did a research that the companies being led by women were more productive, were growing faster. And the reason is very simple, right? Like I always say, if there's sanity in the world today, it's because of the women power. They keep the balance. And the same thing applies to organizations also. If if it's only left to men, we would have plundered, looted, and killed the world trying to prove our dominance. And somewhere we men recognize this thing, so therefore, at the personal level and the official level, we try to scuttle the growth of women. So when you say that the women need to be tutored, similarly, men need to be tutored that do not fear, think in terms of not a victory, one upmanship, but think in terms of supplementing each other.
Yes, I think you're right, Sandeep. In fact, when we talk of brainwashing and conditioning, we do not realize, sometimes I do feel sorry for men also, because, all the kind of uh, this whole upbringing where you are taught that you have to always be aggressive, you've got to, men can't cry, you can't show emotions, you can't, you should never appear weak. First of all, associating tears with weakness itself is something I have a problem with, because I think uh, if you are not able to give vent to emotions, you are probably not developed fully as an emotional being. And I think humans are, regardless of their gender, prone to emotions. And I'm sure if something sad happens and you uh, cry a bit, it will not only allow the man to be a little more in touch with his own emotions, it might also prevent women from using tears as a weapon, as you were trying to say. And it will also help men not get so affected if a woman cries before him, because crying will become then a natural gender, not specific to a gender, but general kind of an emotional bearing. Uh, so it's difficult at times. I understand that men, yeah, they do have insecurities, especially when they see a woman who is not dependent on them, because men have been kind of conditioned to believe that the woman will always be dependent on them. They've seen their mothers dependent on their fathers, asking for money, asking for, simple things. You expect that, even I remember, even as early as, I mean, even about 15 years ago, when my children were in school, and I'm talking of one of the prime Delhi schools, okay. And the kids, the new principal was introduced to the children, and my kids were in the 8th or ninth standard, so they weren't little children. And the principal says, I'm so happy, you children, you should be happy your parents have come here. Be grateful for your fathers who work hard. and bring money, and for your mothers who look after you and cook for you and give you so much love. And here was a woman principal of a leading Delhi school making this statement. I was horrified. I said, if this is the kind of image that you are giving your children, and my kids, for example, have never seen a mother who is dependent on a father. I don't depend on my husband for any. I've never begged for money, or I don't even ask for even financial advice. I think I decide my investments my way. I decide, my decisions are pretty much independent. We do consult each other, but it's certainly not a, it's certainly not a dependency relationship. But if you find a principal in a school saying this, and in a school where you expect modern children to be, from one of the capital of India, after all, then what of the poorer areas, remote areas, village schools, teachers there who haven't even been exposed to. So you are right. I mean, men are so badly conditioned that they do get insecure when they see women, and especially a woman boss. I think nothing can threaten men more than having a woman boss, especially if she's a woman boss who means business. Because women are also stereotyped into being either she's the oh so lovely mother, kind of gentle nurturer, or she's this absolute horrific Chandi Chamundi who's always screaming around and prone to mood swings.
Yeah.
So you stereotype women also in this way, not realizing that just like men, women also come in all forms and shapes. Some of us are emotional, some of us are not. Some of us are weak. Some of us want to be aggressive, some don't. And it's the same with men. I mean, there are some emotional men, there are weaker men, there are stronger men. Why do we have to straight jacket everything into gender? Because gender is just one aspect of our entire being, and that is where I think this whole bias comes. And then of course there are these subtle ways in which your bosses will bring in talk, because I remember there would be meetings and meetings where I'd be the only female participant. So I would obviously be wearing a colorful sari. So the first thing would be, oh, Sharda has brought color into the room. So you're like, look, I'm a woman, so I don't have to wear a black suit. I wear a sari, but that doesn't make anything different. So we do, some of it is in jest,
Hmm.
we must realize that. But uh, this insecurity that men have is kind of, again, due to the very same reason that women have diffidence and hesitation in taking up stronger and more in your face kind of roles. uh, it is easy for a woman to be an air hostess, but it's not so easy for her to want to be a pilot. It is easy for a woman to be a nurse, but she shouldn't be a doctor. So a woman can cook all the time at home, but she can't be a cook. She can't be a professional hotel chef. She can be a designer. She can stitch and embroider her children's clothes and everything, but she dare not do it as a profession. So these are the kind of biases where we need to understand the same operations. Once it starts earning money, then it becomes a man's domain. As long as it's a unpaid, non-recognized kind of job, leave it to the women, because women have, I think we also have to understand that women over the last 100 years have progressed a lot. A, because of the the pill which has helped us, because you're able to control pregnancies. The menstrual hygiene has improved, so you're able to travel regardless. So these things have helped women come out more now than they could in the past. So probably it's only this generation of men who have actually seen women who can do everything exactly like men could, because we have technology, we have education, we have access, we have these abilities to overcome our biological issues. uh, and then we've got over a lot of superstitions and other cultural biases. So women today are a very different set of women from the women your our mothers or grandmothers were. So it does create fear in men. uh, but I think a lot of men are also excited about it, and I think overall, uh, every organization and every family benefits when both men and women become equal stakeholders and decision makers. Families where mothers are powerful and important and decision makers always land up having better leaders in among their children. Their children are better sorted, they have better ambitions, they have better understanding of world and visions, and they have more compassion also. So I think there is a study to prove that equality helps in every sense.
Yeah, you're right, because this is what I was saying, because of the natural instinct of the women to nurture, right? They're in a very good position, and they have been in that position to keep a balance in society. You see, and the natural instinct of the man to be the provider, which was
Mm,
primarily hunting, going out, killing, and bring it back, aggression, right? So you see, but the problem which I have is one. Now, and I've spoken to a lot of women in India and abroad across continents, right? This tendency to nurture, or this compulsive nature to nurture, I've seen women all over the world take a backseat. As a result, they allow their children, their partners, their husbands, their boyfriends to come to the fore, and they take a secondary role. And when they take a secondary role, obviously their needs are not met. And when their needs are not met, they convince themselves, and later on that translates into internal turmoil and frustration. As a result, they lose all their power. And this I have seen across countries, across cultures.
yes, you're
So,
right, Sandeep. Sorry, yeah.
so yeah, so this is something, which I believe women need to work upon themselves. Okay. And it's a very simple thing. You see, like I always say, there's a central point, and around the central point, a circle is created. Now, each one of us, whether it's a man or a woman, we are the central point of our life. And other people, they come from the circle into us, right? So they are dovetailing into us. But if I move away from the central point and allow the others to come to the center, and I go on the periphery, then instead of they dovetailing into me, I start dovetailing into them. So all women need to do is stop moving out from the center, reclaim their position in the center, and operate from there rather than operating from the periphery. And once they do that, my personal feeling is inclusiveness would automatically follow, first at the personal front, that's the home level. The women would start speaking, would start expressing their wants and desires, which would automatically translate into expression in the workplace. And even in workplace, the shift will start happening.
Mm, I have a little problem with that, because then we kind of leave it to the women to take the initiative to break this whole, diversity debate, because it's almost as if women have to start reclaiming the center again. But I think it's not that easy, because it's also necessary for corporates to understand and organizations to understand that diversity and inclusivity is not just a platitude, as I was saying earlier. It also
Hmm.
is important, because you should not see inclusivity or diversity as a cost center. You have to see it as a profit center. You have to see your implementing inclusivity as something that's going to bring you greater returns. You're going to have greater cultural sensitivity. You are going to have greater creativity, probably a more varied product base to be able to offer, different markets you can explore. And here I'm not only talking of gender, we include everybody. We include all diversities of all sorts, uh, you should kind of not take it for a certain recognition or just as a compliance of CSR provisions or this, that, and the other. It is something you should take as a proactive step to bring business to you, to bring you have to get better uh, bottom lines. And unless you see it like that, and unless you make people central to your growth, and every organization has to realize that, because regardless of what product you sell, people are the most important. Your biggest resource is the people who work for you. And if you're not able to cater to that, and you're not able to ensure the best policies to get every kind of person on board, then you're leaving out a large number. I mean, even Fortune 500 says that even between 2012 and 2020, the number of African Americans, I mean, or in business has come down, and you don't even have 1% in the top CEO position, whereas their population is close to 13-15%. So there you see how, and women, of course, are 50% of the population. In India, we are closing in on 50 finally, thank God. And in many other countries, we are beyond 50%, because women do outnumber men in most developed countries. Women are probably biologically the stronger sex, regardless of what men may believe. Because strength is not only in terms of physical fighting and being able to beat up someone or lift weights. Strength is also your biological, your genetic capability, your immunity, your ability to withstand emotional trauma, your stability of your heart, your ability to uh, override all the various health issues that can plague you. So there, the female is better. The female infant even is considered to be stronger, has much better chances of survival in the first year of her life than the male. So this whole attribute of strength and kind of fixing it to the male is itself warped. It's incorrect. It's biologically incorrect. And that is where that is where the thing begins. We are no longer hunters. That is okay for when we were hunters and we were sitting in, as I said, today we are not. We are in a digital world. We are a global village. We are all talking in terms of access to everyone. And here again, of course, I agree that even socially we must ensure that, especially as a country like India, that we are able to overcome all these divides. We are able to overcome the gender divide, the digital divide, the socio-economic divide, the regional cultural divides. People from the northeast, people from Kashmir, or people from religious minorities should also be part of the whole, because we are all, after all, unless you take everyone with you, you're really not taking anyone with you. And that is the my take on this, that if you leave women out, you're not doing anything for yourself either.
No, that is true, totally true, and I agree with you, right? You see, I started with the example of the carving in Ajanta Ellora, the couple carrying it, and I said supplement, complement,
Right.
right? Yes, whether it is inclusiveness or diversity, the culture of complementing, the culture of collaboration needs to be worked out, right? Personally, leaving everything to the women is wrong. Leaving everything to the male is also wrong, right?
Absolutely.
Women need to work on their front. Men need to work on their front, right? So this is the I part of business where the men are working on their front, women are working on their front. The second is the V part where the culture comes in, right? So the culture has to be collaboration, co creation, coexistence, co accountability.
True.
And then comes the it part of business, which is the infrastructure, systems, processes, etc., etc. So,
Yes.
what is happening in the corporate world? The focus is primarily on the it part.
Mm.
ये policy बना दो, ये कर दो, right? The I part, that is ethics and values, the V part, the culture part, is grossly missing. So, the corporates need to look at the value quotient, the ethical quotient, they need to look at the cultural quotient. Only then, I believe, the problem of inclusiveness and diversity can be resolved, because till the time you don't have those values, you don't inculcate those values, acceptance will not be there and that culture will not be there. So, by just making formulas or making schemes is not going to really solve the problem. This is my take on this entire issue. So, as usual, you see, the topic was so interesting that we have done 41 minutes, So, and we can keep going on this topic. Well, we have two remarks. Prashant said some brilliant opening concepts, inclusivity by
Thank
Sharda.
you. Thank you, Prashant.
Aditi Dash says also men are given too much credit for doing basic household core. Yes, Aditi, we men are given too much credit, and believe me, we love it. So, Shada, so what are your final words?
I think Sandeep, you put it very brilliantly when you said organizations need to look at the I, the we, and the it parts of their entity, because unless they fix all these identities together, they're not really uh, getting anywhere. And as we spoke right from the beginning, these are not mere lip service kind of things. You're not kind of doing it as if you're doing a favor to women, or you're doing a favor to the minorities, or those left out, by bringing them in and creating this diverse culture. You are doing a favor to yourself and to your business and to society and to the growth of yourself and future generations. So who benefits best is the corporate itself. So there is no need for us to try to pretend that we are doing, this whole trying to cover it under corporate social responsibility and things like that. This is not necessary. Those are all very good. You must move for those, because that's the way to probably implement it. But as a principle, inclusivity is as important as every other corporate principle that you follow. So just take it as one of the very basic tenets of management, one of the basic tenets of leadership.
Well, thank you, Sharda. And my closing remark to all corporates is only one: work on your I, work on your we, work on the it, and remember, business is an ecosystem which functions in a larger socio-economic ecosystem. So strengthen your internal ecosystem, the balance will be taken care of by itself. So thank you everyone for joining me and Sharda today. And we look forward to seeing you, meeting you, and interacting with you as we go forward. Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Sandeep.